to the water where my past can be swept away in the current of your mercy, and I know I'll never be the same. There's no limit to your promise. Jesus, you have done it all for me. Jesus, you have done it all for me. Grace comes like a wave crashing over me. Grace comes like a wave crashing over and over and over. I will jump into the water where my soul can be satisfied, and your love is overflowing from within me, and it won't run dry. There's no limit to your promise. Jesus, you have done it all for me. Jesus, you have done it all for me. Grace comes like a wave crashing over me. Grace comes like a wave crashing over and over and over. Grace comes like a wave crashing over me. Grace comes like a wave crashing over and over and over. There's healing in the water with a love that flows so deep. Wash over me, wash over me. Forgiveness in the water with a love that flows so deep. Wash over me, wash over me. Salvation in the water with a love that flows so deep. Wash over me, wash over me. Grace comes like a wave crashing over me. Grace comes like a wave crashing over and over and over. Grace comes like a wave crashing over me. Grace comes like a wave crashing over and over and over.
I will raise a hallelujah in the presence of my enemies. I will raise a hallelujah louder than the unbelief. I will raise a hallelujah. My weapon is a melody. I'll raise a hallelujah. And heaven comes to fight for me.
I'm gonna sing in the middle of a storm. Louder and louder, you're gonna hear my praises roar. Up from the ashes, hope will arise. Death is defeated, the King is alive.
hallelujah with everything inside of me. I'll raise a hallelujah, and I will watch the darkness flee. I'll raise a hallelujah in the middle of the mystery. I'll raise a hallelujah. In fear you lost your hold on me.
I'm gonna sing in the middle of the storm. Louder and louder, you're gonna hear my praises roar. Up from the ashes, hope will arise. Death is defeated, the King is alive.
Sing a little louder.
Sing a little louder.
Sing a little louder.
Sing a little louder.
I'll sing a little louder.
Sing a little louder.
Oh, I'll sing a little louder.
Oh, sing a little louder.
Sing a little louder.
In the presence of my enemy.
I'll sing a little louder.
Louder than the unbelief.
I'll sing a little louder.
My weapon is a melody.
Oh, I'll sing a little louder.
Oh, heaven comes to fight for me.
I'll sing a little louder.
In the presence of my enemy.
Sing a little louder.
Louder than the unbelief.
Sing a little louder.
My weapon is a melody.
Oh, I'll sing a little louder.
Heaven comes to fight for me.
Oh, I'll sing a little louder.
I'm gonna sing in the middle of the storm. Louder and louder, you're gonna hear my praises roar. Up from the ashes, hope will arise. Death is defeated, the King is alive. I'm gonna sing in the middle of the storm. Louder and louder, you're gonna hear my praises roar. Up from the ashes, hope will arise. Death is defeated, the King is alive.
I'll raise a hallelujah. I'll raise a hallelujah. I'll raise a hallelujah.
Hi everyone, my name is Hannah Stutzman. I am the student director of the Friesen Center this year, and we are so excited to bring you this chapel today about Crush Hunger. Crush Hunger is the annual food drive competition that we are involved in through Community Harvest Food Bank in Fort Wayne. All of our donations actually go to Love Inc. here in Huntington, so everything that we donate actually goes straight back into the community. And I am really excited about this chapel. We're going to start with Dr. Melanie Park. She is an education professor here at Huntington University, and she's going to share some of her story and how food insecurity has affected her and has affected her teaching. And her story is just a really great example of why we should be giving back into the community. And then we will conclude with an interview that I did with Maya Pfeffer. She is a part of Community Harvest Food Bank. She is the campaign coordinator. So we have been working very closely to get this ready for you guys. And at the end, I'll explain a little bit more about where you can be donating. And so let's get started.
Hello, my name is Melanie Park, and I am a professor in the education department. Before coming to Huntington University, I taught first grade, preschool, and middle school. In education, we often talk about the importance of including concrete objects in our lessons. So I have a little memory hook here to help you start thinking about food insecurity among children. I actually used this backpack when I taught middle school reading remediation. I was teaching the students how to analyze characters, and I explained how authors oftentimes create backstories to help us better understand their characters. But backstories aren't isolated to just characters in books. In fact, every single one of us has an invisible backpack that we carry around with us that includes all of our life experiences. And what I hope you'll start to think about today is how those backstories or our life experiences often influence our behavior. It's also a good reminder that what you see on the outside is only a very small part of a person's life story. In fact, the contents of the backpacks that we carry, we often keep hidden from the outside world. So take, for instance, what you might see if you ever visited my middle school classroom. I have been known to perform raps for my students. And so if you ever came in to my middle school room on a day when I might be throwing down a rap, you could see middle school kids either rolling their eyes or maybe laughing uncontrollably. And whichever the case, the atmosphere was joyful. But I wouldn't want the outward appearance of my classroom to fool you, because if you started to dig into the backstories of my students, you'd find that every one of my students was in my classroom for a very specific reason. It was because they'd struggled with reading their entire lives. Some came into my room as sixth graders reading at a first or second grade reading level, and it was my job to work with them so that by the time they left Riverview Middle School in 8th grade, they'd be able to handle high school textbooks. But here's the point I want to make today. When I started to delve into some of the root causes of my students' reading delays, I often discovered that many of my students carried around some pretty weighty backpacks. And more often than not, poverty was part of the life experience in that backpack that created their backstory. In other words, their reading difficulties may have had more to do with their home life than their reading ability. But we can't really blame the parents because, it's hard to justify spending money on books when there's barely enough money to put food on the table. And it's hard to concentrate on reading when your stomach's growling. I personally know about those experiences because the reality of poverty is actually part of my own backstory. When I was just 4, my dad left my mom, and my mom and I were forced to live in a tent in a campground for a while because we literally didn't have anywhere to go. At that time, I thought that my mom was serving chicken noodle soup every night because she maybe thought it was my favorite food, and I did like chicken noodle soup. And I also thought she didn't ever eat any because, I figured she didn't like it. It was only later that I realized that she only had one can of chicken noodle soup every night because that was all she could afford. And she wanted to make sure that I wasn't the one who would go hungry. My mom tried really hard to protect me from the stigma of being poor by keeping our entire situation a secret. But poverty often leads to a vicious cycle of other difficulties. For example, when my mom finally was able to get a job, she had to find a babysitter for me. And because she didn't have a lot of money, she couldn't afford a regulated daycare center. Because of that situation, I was put into an unsafe home where I was abused, and it was then that I began to just completely put up a wall. I discovered that if I remained silent, then adults couldn't hurt me. And so I cowered in the back of my classrooms throughout elementary school and was rarely noticed because I also had to switch schools every year, which points to another issue among children in poverty. Stability is really difficult to create when your parents have to live paycheck to paycheck. Landlords and apartment complexes can raise their rent whenever they want to, and if you can't afford it, you have to move on. Sickness due to malnutrition is also common among children in poverty, which just adds even more stress to the family budget. During my kindergarten year, when we were experiencing the greatest financial strain, I had strep throat 3 times, the measles, chickenpox, and scarlet fever. So imagine what that did to our finances. Every time my mom missed work as a single mom to stay home with me, she didn't get paid. And those doctor bills piled up. When I look back on that time, I wonder how in the world my mom made it. But then I also thank God for giving me those experiences, because ultimately they uniquely equipped me to be in tune to the same difficulties of the students I taught. You know, God often will take our pain and give it a purpose. And without a doubt, I am grateful that I could empathize with my students when they shared their struggles. For example, I was known as the teacher who kept snacks in the closet, but I intentionally put them just inside my classroom and around the corner where no one would notice if they came in to get them. I did that because I knew that some of my students needed breakfast, but they couldn't stand the humiliation of going through the breakfast line, because the middle schoolers often knew that if you were in line at breakfast, it meant that you were on free and reduced lunch. So my students could sneak into my closet and get what they needed without anyone ever knowing. When people think of food insecurity, they often only focus on the discomfort of the hunger, and they fail to confront all the other difficulties experienced by families who can't afford to put food on the table. I pray that as you continue to learn about poverty and food insecurity, you'll recognize the role you can play to become a bridge between a difficult backstory and being a blessing of creating a fulfilled life. God gifted me with a lot of community members who became that bridge for me, and I challenge you to do the same. I think of a lady who worked with my mom, who brought me a gift and supper on my birthday when I was in kindergarten. But I distinctly remember her having to stand outside and watch me open the gift through the window so she wouldn't be exposed to my measles. And I think about the Christmas morning after my stepfather had passed away, when packages showed up on the doorstep after my brother and sister and I thought for sure there'd be no Christmas that year. As I close out, I hope that my personal story will help you reflect a little bit on your own experiences. Maybe you have a backpack loaded with blessings, and you now feel the desire to share those resources with children who are burdened. Or maybe you have a backstory like I do that enables you to have compassion and empathy for children in need, which just further fuels your desire to help. I know you have a servant's heart, And I pray God will continue to show you how you can be a bridge for those who need a helping hand. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Maya Pfeffer. I am the Community Engagement Coordinator for Community Harvest Food Bank, and I am the coordinator of the You Can Crush Hunger campaign.
Okay, so we have some questions for Maya that we are going to be asking her, and she's going to answer them, and just about Crush Hunger and about food insecurity in the area. So who does food scarcity affect in the area, and how does it affect them, and how does it affect the larger community?
Sure. So at Community Harvest, one thing we often say is that food insecurity can affect anyone at any time. We're a member of Feeding America, the nation's largest food bank network, and they reported last year that about 12.5% of people in the United States are affected by food insecurity. So at the food bank, about 30% of the people we serve are not qualifying for any other assistance through the government, so they don't qualify for SNAP or WIC. These are people who are considered the working poor or the ALICE population, if you're familiar with that term. It means asset limited, income constrained, but employed. So these are working families or people that may not normally struggle, but if something happens like a diagnosis, a severe illness, or a loss of income, that can make it difficult for them to put food on the table. So, you know, we all know what it feels like to be hungry, but when you don't know when your next meal is coming from, that can really have an effect on your physical and your mental well-being, which obviously affects how people interact in the community. And on kind of a long-term basis, that means that, you know, people's ability to be engaged and connected citizens is really affected, and there are long-term costs associated with healthcare as well.
Okay, thank you. So why should college students especially be passionate about helping people with food insecurities?
Sure. So I think for college students, it's important to be aware of and engaged in fighting food insecurity, because it might be a battle that a lot of your classmates are actually fighting in silence. So there have been a lot of studies recently showing that there's a pretty big percentage of students that actually would qualify for SNAP benefits. And so there are people who are struggling on campus as well as in your wider community. And I think starting with destigmatizing food insecurity and letting people know that there's help available is really the first step to tackling the problem. For a lot of students, you know, college can be that first taste of independence, but it also comes with more financial responsibility. And so some of the challenges that you face with that, or just the different things you're learning about in your courses about social issues, can really, you know, make you aware of broader issues in the world. And that's an opportunity to activate that compassion and empathy, and then to be empowered by doing something about it, even if it's just in a small way, by donating a can of food or a few dollars to a campaign like this.
Perfect. So why are you passionate about finding resources for these struggling with food insecurity, and how does that relate to your values and beliefs?
Sure. So I'm passionate about helping people who face food insecurity because I think that this is something we're all in together. Community Harvest has always been about neighbors helping neighbors, and that's part of our mission that really resonates with me personally. I think providing someone with a meal, it's not going to fix all of the problems that they may be experiencing in their life, but that's one less problem that they have to face as they're working through those other challenges. So for me, it's really about the golden rule and paying it forward, honoring people's dignity as you're helping them, no matter what they're going through.
So what is done with all of the donations? I know we donate to Love Inc. here in Huntington, but like, where do the other schools donate to, and how many people are impacted by Crush Hunger?
Sure. So several of the schools that participate actually have food pantries on campus. So the food that they collect and the funds that they raise are allocated to supporting those pantries. Purdue, Fort Wayne, and Manchester have and Ivy Tech also have pantries on campus, sorry. And the other donations come back to Community Harvest. So if a school doesn't have a pantry like St. Francis, they'll donate back to us, and it stays in the Northeast Indiana community. So this campaign is a big help for helping us supply meals through the holidays. Last year we raised 57,000 pounds of food, and it's hard to really pinpoint a number of people served just because it goes through different agencies, but that 57,000 pounds of food actually provided enough meals for 47,000 people.
All right, Maya, well, thank you so much for answering these questions. We're really excited about Crush Hunger and being able to participate again this year.
Yeah, we're really excited to have you be a part of it, and good luck.
Thank you.
So thank you so much, Dr. Park and Maya, for contributing to Chapel today. This year, Crush Hunger for our university looks just a little bit different. Typically, the drop-off bins were in the dining commons, but this year we have put one by each printer in each residence hall. So we thought that maybe it would just be a little bit easier for you guys to just bring them down to the printer instead of carrying them to the dining commons. So hopefully that helps. We want to encourage you guys to continue donating for Canstruction this weekend in Olympiad. All of those cans go directly back to Crush Hunger. Thank you so much, Lauren, and the rest of the SAB team for working with us on that. And you can also donate through PayPal. Just go ahead and shoot the Friesen Center an email. It's just friesencenter@huntington.edu, and we'll get you hooked up with that. We will also be selling snack cakes in the dining commons, so all of that money will go directly towards the campaign as well. So there's lots of ways to give, and especially with COVID and families have been increasingly in need of food now, more than ever that we've seen in our lifetime as students. So please, please, please be raiding your pantry. Dollar Tree sells cans for less than $1, I believe. Go raid it with your floor. Like, let's actually make a dent and make a difference in our community this year, because we can.